Hey everybody, Dave here from Blue Bears Games again. Uh, Today I'm gonna do a video that's a little different. Normally I like to sit there and I like to open up, sealed products from Wizards, some, the Commander Precons or the booster boxes, and I'm gonna get to that more later. Today I decided I wanted to do something a little different. It's my pet project. In my first video I explained to you guys and gals that I open the products because I like to make decks that are cheap for beginners that are better than the Wizards product that they produce for precons. I sell them at the cons. So today, I wanted to show you one of them and some of the ideas I have because, in all honesty, when it comes to Magic, I am more of a fan of making the decks than playing the game. Sounds kind of weird, but there are certain people that like to do that. I'm one of them. So today I wanted to actually show you what I would consider one of the better beginner precons I've made over the years, and give you like a little strategy on how it works and what it's supposed to do. And in hopes that if somebody, does buy this at one of the cons, this one's, any of them that I have previewed or I'm going to give a guide to, they can sit there and actually see the strategy and how it works. So I'm going to start with my favorite, probably one of the more powerful ones I made. It's more intermediate level than it is beginner level. I call it Death by Thopter. Now, the rules I have for my precons are this. The first rule is a rarity rule. Every deck has to have at least, or has 3 rares, at least 6 uncommons, and then a slot that is a flex. The flex spot I have is usually either a foil rare, a mythic rare, or a foil that goes into the deck. And I said it in my first video, the themes on these decks is a little bit more concentrated than it is from the Wizards Precons. So I'm going to open it up here. Well, that was the first rule. The second rule follows the rarity rule. It has to be it has to be able to cost $20. Now, when I say it has to cost $20, the cards in the deck may not total equal to $20, but there's a reason for that. Usually when I sell these, I sell them at $20 a piece or 2 for $30 in hopes that I get a couple of friends who are looking to get into the game. They want to do it, but they don't have any cards, or they have limited cards. They don't really have a deck, because we all know what it's like to open just random packs, and what we get out of them is not enough for a deck. So I try to help them. I know the Wizards makes the precons. I'm against the Wizards precons, not so much because, I think they're a bad product. I just think that a lot of the precons they make really aren't as focused as they can be. So you get a lot of fluff, is what I call it. A lot of crap stuff that you really can't do anything with. And I'm not really a big fan of that. So that's the second rule. Has to be enough that I can make a little bit off of it so that I can keep doing this. It is what it is. Some people, they would say that it's a good thing. Some people would say it's a bad thing. I myself think it's a great thing. I've actually made, for the next con coming up, about 38 decks. You can kind of put them into the modern category with some small upgrades. And that actually brings me to the next rule. It has to be upgradable and be able to be put into a type. So, and when I say type, I mean standard or modern. None of these decks will ever compete in vintage, so I wouldn't even go to that. But, if you have a friend who's really into modern and they want somebody to play against, the decks can possibly compete. Standard is a little bit harder because the cards rotate so much, and I'm actually a fan of some of the older cards in the game, so I'd like to get some of those cards out there, index, and show people what this game can really do. So those are the 3 rules that I like to go by. So this one is the one, like I said, called Death by Thopter, and of course the first card you're going to see is good old Ornithopter. I gotta be honest with you, this is my favorite deck for a reason. I have been a blue player since the beginning of Magic, and any opportunity I get to make somebody a blue deck, because it's one of the least popular color choices for newer players. So I like to show them that there is a way to play blue without it being the the bad that people always say it is. It's not a counter heavy deck. It's that way it can, for beginners, that's kind of a stop to letting people enjoy the game. So I went with a different theme. I do have other decks. One of them does have a lot of counters in it for the beginners, but that's for somebody that I have to explain to them specifically. So if I call a deck Death by Thopter, there better be one of Thopters in it. So I went with 4 of them. And I'm going to show you one of the cards in the middle that I have it here. It is the combo part. It is a main part of the deck. It really is what makes the engine go. Esperzoa. A 3 to cast 4/3 flyer is always great. Usually the bounce that it has to put an artifact in your hand every turn during your upkeep, usually it's a downfall, but in this deck, that's actually the engine. You want to get to them as quickly as possible. You got your Ornithopters, which are free, so you can bounce that, put it back out. There is a little bit of a combo going on here, so I'll get to the elixirs in a minute. I put Ichor Wellsprings in, because if you're bouncing something, you want to get an advantage of it if it comes back into play. This one helps you draw a card. Mugusith Wellspring, same thing, but it goes for, a land, which is to help you thin out your deck. One of the things that beginners don't realize, things with like fetch lands and stuff that gets land out of your deck and into your hand or into play, the less land you draw, but you can get it into your hand other ways, the better off you're going to get your draws to be. So I got the Wellsprings in there, and then I've got Pilgrim's Eye for the same reason. The reason for these is they're a Thopter, goes with the theme of the deck, and it also helps you get the land. So those are my, sort of combo cards to go with everything, and I'll put them out here so you guys can see them and look at them as we go. So there is your combo right there. Mugusith Wellsprings and Esperzoa and Ichor Wellsprings, just so that you can kind of get it going. Another Thopter. It's kind of to help you draw a card. It goes with the Ichor Wellspring theory. You kind of want to get as many cards in your hand. Blue does that very well, but in this deck, it's not really based upon that. But if I could find a way to do it, I can. Another key piece to this is the Arcbound Crusher. Now remember, these decks are limited to a couple things. One of them I told you before was monetary value. I want to at least make it cheap enough for somebody to buy. The other unfortunate, limitation I have is actually owning the cards to put in the deck. I have an extensive collection here that I can go through. However, it is limited. Unfortunately, I only had so many of each card. This was one of the ones I had fewer of because it's a little older. It's from Darksteel, which was made about 10 years ago or so, maybe a little longer. I only had a few. I'd like to get my hands on a couple more so I can make this deck again, because I guarantee you I'll sell this at the con. But so this one is a 0/0 Trampler for 4. In a beginner's mind, that's really not that good. But the second ability and the third ability are what make the entire deck run smoothly. Besides the trample, whenever any artifact comes into play, remember, I'm bouncing stuff back to my hand and recasting things that could be free. It comes in with a +1/+1 counter, and then the more important part of it is the modular, which means that when it dies, any of those +1/+1 counters can go on to any of the creatures. So, there is this thematic thing here with the Arcbound Crusher and the jellyfish. I just, love that I have a jellyfish in here. And the other thing that goes with that is the Chief of the Foundry. Again, I'm limited by how many I can have. To upgrade this deck, I would add 2 more, probably take out a couple of other cards. I'll explain that in a little bit. But it makes all your artifacts +1/+1. So every creature that you're putting out there, minus, the very few that aren't really artifacts, they get the buff. It's always good to have a Lord. But again, I'd like to have more. I don't have the actual amount of them. So I want to be able to make other decks, so I kind of have to limit what I can put into each deck. So essentially, this is where your combo is. Now, I said I'd come back to this. Elixir of Immortality. Very cheap to cast. It's a 2. You tap it, you gain 5 life, and you shuffle this and your graveyard back into your library. It kind of helps you live, but more importantly, it's kind of taken everything that may have gone to the graveyard already putting it back in so that you can do your combos of drawing cards with a sky scanner, you know, because you have to bounce them, the Mycosylph World Springs in case somebody destroys your land. To fill out the deck after that, I had to put in some stuff that was a little bit more on the common side that still fit the theme. Aviation Pioneer fits that bill very well. I could have used a couple of things that were from, I believe it was Origins. There's a blue Forticast 1-1 or 2-2, I think it is, that puts 2 Thopters into play. The problem is, again, I was limited into what I actually had available to me. So I put 4 of those in there just to keep the Thopters rolling. Again, blue has card draw. It has the best card draw in the game. That's what it's for. It's the best thing it can do. This one actually fits the theme of the deck much better. You know, it's an instant, not like Divination, which is a 3-decay sorcery. It lets you draw 2 cards. Specifically in this deck, it works very well because it will get you the 2 cards. Efficient Construction, when I saw this build, I went and, you know, nerdgasmed, if you will. I'm a huge fan of Artifact and Blue together. I've told you that, you know, a couple times. This card, I was like, okay, I can actually make a Thopter deck for the conventions, for beginning players with this card. I mean, you're casting artifacts all the time. You're bouncing them back to your hand. You get another Thopter. That could, if you have, say, the Chief of the Foundry out, you can actually get the 1-1s to be, say, up to 2 or 3 3s. So I got a couple of those in there. This is another card that had, you know, limitations based upon the age. If I had more of these, there would be 4 of these in this deck. Affinity is probably one of the more powerful abilities in Magic, just because it's basically free casting things. You can get this to be 1 blue, draw 2 cards. Not a bad casting cost, if you ask me, for drawing 2 cards. So I went with that. I wish I could have had 4. That was the common and uncommon section. Okay, you see that there is a cohesion there. There is an actual theme here that fits together very well. Unlike Wizards decks where there's some fluff in between, every card here helps everybody. Everything goes together. I'll go to the rares, and in the rares, I said earlier, you can upgrade these to be specifically as a type, what we used to call that back in the day, a type, like type 1, type 2. Now they have it is vintage, legacy, modern, and standard. Unfortunately, I got really limited on the rare section. My rules say 3 rares. I could have put some duplicates in on the rares, but I wanted to make these decks more than once, and I was limited by how many I had. So I went with the Sharding Sphinx. It's kind of one of those things where it might look like it's a lot to cast, but remember, these are for beginners, so they got to get used to the higher casting costs, especially if they go in the commander. But for a 4/4 flying, it's whenever an artifact you control deals damage, you create another 1/1. I mean, you're going to probably be making 20 to 30 Thopters. One of them or 2 of them are going to get through, and this says whenever any. So every one that hits is going to create another one. So you're effectively going to make an attacker, or you're going to have an attacker go through while it's tapped. You're going to create an untapped blocker if you need it. So I thought that was a really good addition. Again, limited by my rules and by the limitation of the cost so that I could get these out to people. I love this card. I would have put more in, but as you can see by the symbol, this was from Commander. I don't own an original one. I would love to put more in, but I couldn't. The Thopter Squadron. It's an interesting card. I wish that this was reprinted somehow in a set that was more recent. Unfortunately, this is too old. This is one of the cards, if you wanted to play a modern theme or a modern event or whatever, you'd have to take this out. As far as the card itself, I mean, really, think about this. It comes into play with counters, make more Thopters. Sacrifice a Thopter, put a +1/+1. How many Thopters do you think I'm going to actually have out on the board when you play this deck? Or you're going to have? So you can actually make this thing huge and still get more Thopters out. So, again, it would have to be taken out if you wanted to play more of a modern style itself, or modern, I guess, event. But, you know, if you're playing with your friends, it's okay. You know, we're not gonna have anything there. But the actual centerpiece of what made me think of the deck from Origins, Thopter Spy Network. Every time your turn goes, you put a 1/1 into play if you control an artifact. Do you see all the artifacts? Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've got 10 different ones, multiple copies of each. You're going to have an artifact that. If you don't, something went really horribly wrong. And again, it's blue. The second effect of whenever an artifact creature you control deals damage, draw a card. Goes the same thing with the Sharding Sphinx created. So you could be creating 1/1 Thopters while drawing cards with these two out alone. And remember, Sharding Sphinx is an artifact himself. And then my rule was foil, mythic, or an extra rare for the fourth slot that I have created for these style of decks. Didn't have any foils of the cards that I wanted to put in here. I had a whole bunch of choices. Unfortunately, I had no real option other than this. It can work. It can help. Because it has flash, you get the advantage first. You will be able to cast this. It will help you get cards. It may help your opponent, but it'll help you in the long run more. I would say that if this deck was to be upgraded, this is the first card to go. Again, going by what my rules are for making a deck, I had to put something in there. It fits the theme. It helps you draw the cards. It's blue. So, unfortunately, this is the one that I had. I don't have a whole lot of blue foils left. A lot of those go quickly when I go to the con, so this is what I was stuck with. And then we got the lands. Now, here's where the expensive part in most Magic is. It's in the land. My decks have 20 lands total. I've been looking at like the statistics and how people play like Pauper. And they don't even have, they have 17 lanes. And I was like, okay, I usually play with 20 to begin with on most of my decks anyway, because especially monocolor decks. So 20 is about the right number just so you can have more stuff out. You can have better draws when you're not drawing a land. So for the non-basics, I went with things to thin out your deck. Evolving Wilds, I usually use these in every deck just so that people get used to the fetch land style of play. Not that they're necessarily going to be able to afford them, but just so that they can thin out their deck of land. And I explain that to everybody I sell a deck to because a lot of people don't realize that. I make decks for people all the time. And, you know, I'm building a commander deck for somebody, and they don't understand the whole fetch land theory that you want to thin your deck of bad draws. Lands are a bad draw unless you're in need, but you're supposed to already have it out through fetching. So I went with Lonely Sandbar. They just got reprinted in Modern Horizons, so that puts this card into Modern, which was really great for me. That means that I can explain to people how to make it, to update the deck more to a modern type. So I was happy about that. I did not, however, have a lot of them. I only put 2 in for that. This one's more of a, let's just see if this works kind of card. You know, sacrifice an artifact and gain a life. That goes with the theory of the elixirs of immortality. So if you're going to gain life and shuffle everything back in, and you're going to keep drawing cards, I figured Phyrexia's Core was kind of like a good way to get stuff off the board and gain life and be able to use your Elixir of Immortality more effectively. Sure, you want to keep things on the board, but I mean, how many Thopters that are tokens do you think you're making? That's another thing. You want to live. If you can't live, what's the point of playing? So I put that in there just to have the survivability. You know, defensively, you want to keep playing. So that was the deck I made. Again, $20. Sell them at the cons. These are for beginners. Before you roast me, these are not for you expert players out there. These are for this is my contribution to the Magic community, getting more people in playing the game. You know, it's my passion. It's what I do. So that was the reason for why I do what I do when it comes to putting these decks together. I said earlier I have about 30. I'm going to say 35 just as a round number. I don't remember the exact number. These kinds of decks I sell at the conventions. I have probably sold about 40 or 50 of these over the last 2 or 3 years that I started doing this. And it's been very successful. People have enjoyed it. I've had a lot of customers come back and buy another, even though that they've added to the collection and they've enjoyed everything about them. I actually remember the last con, which was about 6 months ago. I had a customer come up to me and buy a dinosaur deck I had made that he didn't buy the previous con because he didn't have the $20. And he bought it and said he'd been waiting. He had looked through it 4 times, 5 times, because I let my customers look at the deck. And he said he loved it, and I actually got, good feedback from it. And so it's good to hear the positive feedback from the customers. They really love what I do, and I always have done things differently. Oh, another thing I forgot to mention. Every deck that I sell, to give a little bit more value, I know that these are not the greatest deck boxes, but if you've ever gone out and tried to find the actual deck boxes that like pre-cons come in, like I'll show you. Hold on, let me get one. Things like this, these boxes, I gotta tell you, they're actually harder to get your hands on than I thought. I try to keep my costs down so I can at least make a little bit, so I can make decks more stuff for everybody. Those are really hard to get. So if anybody out there has some extra ones lying around, I actually am running out of these. I bought a case of 50 of these, and I made 38 decks this time. I ran out of the regular deck boxes the last time, and I had half of these and half of the regular deck boxes that Wizards makes on the table. I sold all the ones that were in these boxes as well. So I kind of am running out of deck boxes. I will order more of these, but a lot of people really like the older deck boxes that I showed you, the 5th edition style box. It's a lot easier to carry around. So if anybody's got them, man, I love to hear about it, because they're a lot harder to get a hold of than I thought. So that's my video. I have started a couple things that I'd like for you guys to go ahead and check out. I have a Facebook page. I'd like you to go ahead and, if you could, find me. It's Blue Bears Games. Like the page if you like what you see. I'll have a lot more coming up. Subscribe to this channel. I will be doing a lot more. I have ideas coming out of me that, I like to make these videos, and it's really been a pleasure doing this for you guys, and I'd like to do more. I'd like for you guys to enjoy it more. I'd like some feedback. I started a Twitter account. Unfortunately, that's where I just share little bits of news. Go ahead and follow me there as well. Again, Blue Bears Games for everything. And hopefully you enjoyed this video. Again, feedback is definitely appreciated. And I will see you next time at Blue Bears Games. Thank you.